I think we should get started because I'm sure this is going to be a really interesting presentation. We certainly have had a lot of people who have signed on to join us. So let me introduce the EWI and everything else. So the Experienced Workforce Initiative was started in about 2018, and the mission is to support and promote the engagement of adults age 50 plus in the workforce continuum, from volunteer work to stipend-based training to part and full-time employment. We accomplish this by educating employers about the benefits of hiring older workers and providing networking and skill building opportunities for older adults through a variety of ways. And one of our favorite ways to do this is through our quarterly lunch and learns. So we decided that LinkedIn would be, it's a tool that is used increasingly by HR people, and we thought it would be beneficial to educate our audience on the benefits of using LinkedIn and some of the challenges and how employers look at that. So to this end, I'd like to introduce the person who's going to introduce our speaker today. Dee Heinmiller is the Senior Companion Program Manager at Land of Sky. She's part of our steering committee, and she's going to make the introductions of our guest speaker today. So thank you, Dee, and if you would take it away.
You're welcome. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Again, my name is Dee Heinmiller. I'm part of the steering committee, and I have the actual privilege and honor to introduce our friend Rick Guthrie, who's going to talk to us a little bit about LinkedIn. Rick has been almost 35 years in manufacturing, working in consumer products, paper products, and aerospace. He spent most of his career in human services, but is also in operational roles. He currently works for Friday Services as a professional recruiter, and he's this executive recruiter for Friday Services. And then he spends his time in Chattanooga with his wife and has 2 children and growing families. Just had a grandchild about 3 months ago, and here another one's on the way. So we absolutely welcome you, and we've prepared Rick with some of your questions, and we're just going to let him roll. So welcome and thank you for being here, Rick.
Yep, thank you so much. I guess this is really going to be kind of an interactive thing, and I guess let me preface this by saying I'm going to share with you my thoughts and my experience. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's what everybody does, but as an executive recruiter, I can certainly share with you kind of what's hopefully some things that could be helpful to you, what works for me and what I've seen work for candidates. I've kind of got 5 areas I'm going to cover, and so let me just tell you what they are. I'm going to talk a little bit about recruiters, what recruiters and employers look for in LinkedIn profiles, what's important to have on your LinkedIn profile, what's least important, or at least from my perspective, what's least important, what's the process for matching that I think employers use to match a LinkedIn profile with what they're looking for, their job description, and then I think we'll talk a little bit about some mistakes people make, okay, in there. I would invite any one of you all, as we go through this, if you've got questions, I'm good with you interrupting me. I have no problem with that for us to interact. I think I can go through my piece of it, probably 10 to 15 minutes, something like that, and then allow have questions after if you want to hold them. So whatever you're comfortable with, any of that works for me. Okay. I mean, my objective here is to help you guys. So whatever is helpful for you, let me know. Let me start out by just kind of introduction by saying that technology, LinkedIn being a tool, is becoming ever increasing for folks like myself, because when I have a job opening in the Asheville area, and typically recruiters will work more than one area. I mean, my area, what I work really is Greenville, Knoxville, Asheville, towards Charlotte. So kind of a regional area. And most recruiters work in regions. And so it's one thing, it's good to keep that in mind. I think one of the things that I would say is it cuts both ways, but that I look for are keywords. I think that's one of the things as you think about what you're, what's important to you and what you're trying to achieve from a job standpoint is make sure that you've got some keywords in there. Okay. And I mean, I place engineers, I place supply chain folks, financial folks. And so oftentimes a tip for you is to take a look at what are employers hiring? In other words, if you look at a job online and you say, hey, that's for me, what are some of the key basic words that are used in those job descriptions? Think about that and look at a number of them, not just one. I think one of the things too is that you want to make sure as you go through your LinkedIn profile, as you put it together, something that drives me batty is folks that don't have chronological experience. So in other words, you want to start with your most recent experience, work experience, and then move from there. Okay. Let's talk for just a minute about what a LinkedIn profile looks like. Okay. So I mean, I'm going to do this very quickly because I'm sure you're all familiar with it. But I think one of the key things to me is that the very first top of the LinkedIn page is your name, your picture, your title, and your address. So I would encourage everybody to have a picture, quite honestly. Now, think about what you want people to see. Okay. In other words, if you really want a headshot, that's one thing. If you want to have a picture of yourself working, typically what you do, that's another way to showcase you. But in this day and age, I mean, I do a number, obviously, of video discussions with candidates, but it's nice to have a picture there. It's not necessary, but I like that. I think that it's important for you to put your title, and that really keys an employer as to what have you done and probably what you're looking for. Okay. So just pay attention to the very first part of your LinkedIn profile. To me, one of the key pieces is this next section, which is about, and that's really about you. And to me, I would, I'm a kind of guy that less is better, less is more. Okay. So you want to make sure if you give an employer so much information, that can be confusing, particularly to a recruiter. You want to be very clear on who you are and what you're about. Okay. So the about section really talks a little bit about your professional background and what your objective is. What are you trying to accomplish, today? Some people will have a LinkedIn profile and their objective is just to have that out online so folks can see it. They're not really looking for an opportunity. People that are looking for an opportunity, it needs to be very clear that you are currently looking for an opportunity. And there are ways on LinkedIn that you can use that, or buttons that you can press that tell you that. The one thing that tells me that somebody is serious about looking for a job is they've got their contact information somewhere on that LinkedIn profile, email, cell phone, or something. When I see that, I know that person is ready, serious, and ready for conversation, at least anyway. And I think that's really what your LinkedIn profile does for you. It's kind of like back in the day what a business card did. It's really an introduction that then tells the employer a little bit about you so that then they can determine, or a recruiter like myself, could this be a good match? Is this a potentially good match? Because what's going to tell the tale is the first conversation that you have in terms of, and that's what you want to do is put enough out there that you entice an employer or recruiter to contact you, but not so much that it can be confusing. Okay. I think I'm going to continue on. The about section is important. Then you have the activity, which could be posts or articles or things that you're following. That's not that important to me. Experience is the key piece. I mean, that's kind of the meat of your profile, which in a sense can mimic your resume, but it really talks about what you've done. My encouragement is to include who you've worked for in a chronological way and 2 or 3 key bullets. What you've done, what you've accomplished, what was your position in those areas. And because at the bottom of that section, there's an opportunity to put that there's a button there that talks about where you can put more information that's hidden when you initially look at it, but then a recruiter or an employer can highlight that and really see all the detail. Okay, so it's really to your advantage that you kind of have an executive summary overview, but then you can have detail pieces that you include in there. Of course, education is important, very important, and it depends. Sometimes an employer will tell me experience is more important than education, for example. Or I'm looking for an electrical engineer right now, and so the degree is very important because there's some specific requirements that the individual needs to know. If you have license and or certifications, please include those. Those are oftentimes very key to a job search. And then your skills. And my encouragement is, if you've got, and we all do, 10 or 15 or 20, 30 skills, list the top 5, maybe 8 skills. I don't know that I would, we're trying to, I don't like laundry lists myself. And so I would steer people away from, again, less is better, less is more. Okay. You can end with interest, and that's, that doesn't, I don't really view that very much at all, but some people enjoy putting their interest there. So from a LinkedIn profile standpoint, there's some really key parts that I encourage you to pay attention to. And if you the first time you fill out your LinkedIn profile, it'll lead you through it. If you want to go back and relook at it, I think that's an encouragement, because I think oftentimes LinkedIn will tell me or tell a recruiter how often an individual's looked at their profile or updated their profile. If I see a profile where people have not updated it, that just tells me they're not that serious. So there's a lot of indications. And so not that you've got to go out and do a lot of changing to it, but you might go out and change, something, a minor something, or you may put something in a file to showcase it a little differently, for example. Any questions at this point? Okay.
Rich, I have a question.
Yeah.
So sometimes I talk with dislocated workers who are currently not in a job, but yet on their resume and LinkedIn profile, they have their previous job through present, and they're really not still employed with that employer. If a recruiter finds this to be true, what questions, does that raise questions?
Yeah, I think, I'm preaching to the choir here when I say this. And so just, I understand that. But, to me, the big overview of a resume or a LinkedIn profile is to be clear, to be articulate, and to have no hint of misleading. Okay. Because, again, if a recruiter or a company detects that something's not quite right and they dig into it, then you don't want to create questions. All you want to create answers. Okay. And so, not that anybody would be misleading, but oftentimes what I find, Barb, is an individual have, and this is more than times than not, in education, they attended state university or wherever they live. Okay. They did not complete it. They did not complete the degree. And so if you attended, it's okay to put when you attended and what courses you took or whatever. But if you did not complete your degree, be very clear with that. Okay. Because to me, that's just another indication that, you're trying to be very clear, and it's going to put you in better stead than not. It's the same way to me with individuals that have completed either an assignment or they left a job 6 months ago. I would put in there the month, I worked from this year to this year, if you will, or this month, but at least be clear that you're no longer working. I just think that, again, it doesn't raise any questions. And that's what you're trying to do, is prevent a question, because it's going to come out. It's either going to come out, as the recruiters is discussing your background, and you want it to come out sooner than later, because my job is to do things, to represent the candidate and the client, okay, and to bring them together. And if I'm successful, then I'm going to match the two together for a long career, quite honestly. And that's really what I'm looking for. And so the more information that you have, the better you are, at being able to do that match. Long-winded answer your question.
Rick, I have a question that actually comes out of the chat box.
Yeah.
So Sean asked, what about skills tests? He's taken the Excel test, for example. What do you think about those types of tests?
I mean, I think they're good. I think I would include those in there. I mean, to me, when I measure skills, I'm really looking at an individual that's been in an assignment or been in a job for X number of months or years, and there's results that are included in their bullet points. That, to me, that speaks more volumes than necessarily, from a quality standpoint. But any information like that can be included, I think that's worthwhile, because it tells a recruiter or an employer, here are the areas that's important to them, that they've paid attention to, that they've taken the opportunity to either become certified or to quantify, what their skill level is. Yes.
Thank you.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So I've been to a lot of different LinkedIn meetings, and as a recruiter, are you saying that I should have all the jobs that I've ever had, even though they're not particularly the jobs that, okay, good. Because I took off the last 18 and a half years off my LinkedIn and off of my resume. My resume just reflects what I want to become as a product manager. So thank you. Just wanted to clarify.
I think, everybody has a different take on this. I would say anything 20 years or, past 20 years definitely is not that it's not relevant, but it's not something that you really need to talk about at the moment. And many employers say past 10 years. So, it's really up to you how you want to showcase that. But I think, for myself, working 35, 40 years ago, there's some relevant things that I've continued to do over time, but I don't necessarily want to say, I did that 35 years ago. I want to highlight that in a little different way. So, for example, some folks that are engineers have became engineers with those skills and now have moved into management. So they probably want to highlight more the management necessarily than the initial engineering part of their career, for example. But, I think, again, less is better. Less is more, if you will, from that standpoint.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Sure. Any other questions?
I have one more. If you've had a gap of employment of 2 years or more, how do you explain that or get that across in a positive way in your LinkedIn profile?
Well, some folks, I'm trying to think kind of when I've seen that. Obviously, when a recruiter or employer sees that, there's a question mark. So what was the person doing? What happened? Sometimes it's easily explainable, and you can include that. That talks about went on active duty, if you will, or went to take care of a sick parent, for a year and a half or 2 years, or something to that effect. And to me, you don't always have to explain it, in the LinkedIn profile. But if if you're able to explain that when you talk to the company or the recruiter, to me, that having that nice transition, or at least explainable transition, is very helpful. So yeah, that's a good point, Barb, because that's one of the things that a mistake that can be made is that it's not in chronological order and there's big gaps. And so oftentimes, if you can speak to it, simply in your LinkedIn profile, I would do that. If you can't, then, just be able to, address that when you talk to someone.
Thank you.
Rick, I have another question.
Yes, ma'am.
I frequently work with people who are changing careers.
Yep.
In fact, one of the questions that came in with the registration had to do with somebody who was transitioning out of the military into the workforce.
Right.
Or the other piece that's sort of related to this is sometimes people are looking for multiple types of opportunities. For example, they might be looking for a customer service opportunity, but at the same time, they're open to administrative or office clerk, something like that. So you mentioned keywords earlier. How do they capture all that and be everything to various recruiters. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that would be helpful for an individual to do is when they, on their LinkedIn profile, again, right below your name and picture, or in the about column or the about section, is try to articulate that in a real simple way. My focus in my career is focused on this in the past. My interest, going forward are these. I think that's, just to be that anything that you can put like that, I think is helpful as well. So yeah, I would just list it as such. I mean, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to move to what's important and what I think is important to include on your profile. Again, my number one question when I look at a profile is, what does this individual want to accomplish? What's the objective? Why are they looking for a position? LinkedIn has the opportunity to do a lot of different things. And so one of the things that you as a candidate needs to know are that folks like me as a recruiter are able to see behind the scenes. Meaning, if you're looking for an immediate opportunity, there's a way for you to express that. Okay. And so when I look at a profile, it tells me if a person is looking or not looking, if they're willing to relocate to a certain area where they're willing to relocate to, if they want to do contract work, part-time work, full-time work, those kinds of things. So as you go through and fill out your profile, you have those kind of options. And so that's very helpful to me, because oftentimes I'm looking for a client for contract work, for example, versus full-time work. Not oftentimes, but sometimes. So it gives you an opportunity to fill that out so that when I look at it, I've kind of got the behind the scenes, or if you will, the additional information. And so I look for active candidates that are actively looking for a new role, and I also look for passive, meaning I will reach out and contact candidates that haven't necessarily said, I'm looking, but they've got a great profile and they're really what I'm looking for. So there's an opportunity for them to respond positively or say, hey, thanks for contacting me, Rick, I'm not interested. That as a recruiter, I'm looking for individuals that can fill the role of the client's job description. And I reach out to them and invite them to contact me to learn more about the opportunity. And so either I get a positive or a negative response, from that standpoint. So again, I think that's, your objective in terms of, are you open, are you looking, is important. And then number two, what are you looking for? Are you looking for, as you said, earlier, Catherine, this type of position or that type of position? Okay. There's some individuals that have been in senior positions for 20 or 30 years, or even 10 years. Their life changes any number of ways, and they don't want to do that. They want to step back into a position that's not a senior position. They'll put that on their profile, so that gets to be pretty obvious. I mean, I had an individual in Asheville that was in charge of an engineering department in a large manufacturing company, and it was just a work-life balance issue. I mean, with him. So we looked for the kind of position he wanted, and he stepped back and is in a different position now, and he's loving what he's doing. So, it's those types of things. I think I've covered most of my key points. Again, if you are looking for a new position, one of the things that keys me is to have contact information. And I know in the day in which we live, that may be a little dicey, and you don't, that's not absolutely necessary, but oftentimes that's a real key to me, that an individual is pretty serious about finding a new position. I guess the third point is what's least important. To me, again, I'm being redundant here, but I think any information that's old information, 20 years old, maybe 15 years old, you may touch on those skill areas. You may touch on, you want to certainly have your work experience in there, but you got maybe a bullet or two in those areas, not a lot. it kind of ties together perhaps what you've done and what you do now, okay, and how that's built over time. I think too much ancillary information is not helpful. You know, it's not helpful for recruiters or companies. And I think that to really key in on stay clear, stay succinct, you know, in the amount of information that you share is really better. The process for matching, let's talk about that for a minute. And so it's pretty simple. I mean, either a machine's going to match you or a person's going to match you. And actually, interestingly enough, we're looking for the same kinds of things. Typically, if there's a job, you know, on any of the job boards, you may get several hundred, if not several thousand applicants for a particular job. So obviously what the attempt is how do I take those several hundred, let's just say, down to the top 10 or top 20 candidates. And so again, it's really background, experience, and keywords that you know, that's being looked at from that standpoint. It's pretty obvious to me, since I've done it for so long, it would be for any of you all, when you look at a job description, look at the person's resume, you know, there are ones that fit pretty well, and there are ones that really don't fit. And then there's maybe some in the middle that you have to go and talk to the candidate about and to try to understand and learn more. But again, you know, a way to really match your resume, and it's kind of almost writing it for the job description, is look at jobs that you really want and make sure that your resume, it doesn't have to read exactly like that job description, but that there are key points and key words in your LinkedIn profile that an individual looking for that would pick up, that kind of matches you. I think one of the things that I would say to you is, and I think it's true today, is that if you're looking for a job, the best way to get a job is through your network, not through LinkedIn. LinkedIn, to me, it's kind of like going fishing. If you all have ever been fishing, the more lines you've got in the water and the more hooks you've got baited, the more opportunities that you have. And LinkedIn is one of those lines. But the better line that you've got is your community of people that you know. In other words, let's say company X has got the job that you want. The first question you ought to ask yourself is, do I know somebody in company X that I can talk to that could be my representative to the person in HR? Can they take my resume to the person in HR? That's, you know, your community of people that you know, that you've worked with, or that you know personally, is probably your biggest tool, quite honestly. So that's one of the things that I always tell candidates is, don't forget to use, you know, your network. That's critical.
Rick, I have a question about that. How many recruiters do you think, like, do you automatically go out and check people's LinkedIn profiles when you get a job candidate? Do you think recruiters they may not be the best way to get a job, maybe through your network is better, but how many recruiters do you believe actually back up what they're seeing by looking at people's social media?
A lot. So social media tells you an awful lot about an individual. And what's interesting is I had a hiring manager one day ask me, do you ever just Google this person that's in any of your candidates' names and see what comes up? And it'd be interesting for you to Google your name and see what comes up about you, because there's a lot of information about there, you know, plus and minus, about all of us. To be honest with you, I'm not on Facebook. My wife is. So I don't access Facebook, but there are a lot of recruiters that do. I mean, you know, I had a client the other day that said, have you looked on social media, you know, in terms of the background check for individuals? So yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there now today, and it's accessible, but certainly a Google search, and that's about the most simple way you can take a look at what's there. But yeah, that's one of the things that is looked at. Most companies, and all the professional searches I do, require background checks, and what they're really looking for primarily is our criminal background, checks, particularly, state, federal types of things. They're looking for that, number one. Number two, they're looking for degree verifications. If I graduated from Harvard, did I really graduate from Harvard? Is there a record of that, for example? So those are really the two basic background pieces that most employers look for. Okay, any other questions?
I have one, Rick. So where on a resume do you put your social media links? I've seen some resumes where they have their Facebook, their LinkedIn, their Twitter account, multiple social media accounts at the top. And then I've seen that at the bottom. And how much is too much? I mean, maybe you use 6 different social media platforms. Is that a pro or is that a negative?
I guess it really is. That's kind of an interesting question. I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask the answer. Most of the candidates that I deal with don't put social media information. But what the contact information that most people have is an email address and a cell number. And a lot of candidates don't even put their home address. I live in Asheville, North Carolina. Here's my cell number. Here's my email address, for example. If you want to put your social media, that to me, that invites me to go out and take a look. And, if you want me to do it, that's okay. But I don't think that's necessary. And it hasn't been necessary for me. Now, maybe some other, different, if I were applying for one of the jobs I have now as a social media manager, okay, for a company, then maybe I would be looking at their social media, from that standpoint. But I would say my recommendation would be to put, more, again, less is more. I wouldn't put it out there, but that's just me.
Thank you.
Wendy, did you have a question?
Oh, yes. So after grad school, I had a child, and what was meant to be a stopgap job has lasted 10 years. I'm still at that job. And I could put that in the little about me, like not mention having a child, but say, I've been working at this in the past and I'd like to do something different moving forward. But what is the best approach if my current employer doesn't know I'm looking for a job to say, if I say no, we contact your employer, and I say no, is that a turnoff to the recruiters?
No, basically part of our job is confidentiality. People need to have the ability and they certainly have the right to look for opportunities without their employer knowing about it. Interestingly enough, some employers, would really not, some employers wouldn't like that. And some employers actually are okay with that because they know that their employees have to grow, for example. But nonetheless, I think it's better, confidentiality is better. Certainly as a recruiter, that's one of the first things I talk to every candidate about, is that you're going to share some information with me. And my commitment to you is I don't share it with anybody unless you and I talk first, okay? Your resume or anything. So if a recruiter doesn't do that, you need to move on to another one that will. I think you have to think about that when you creatively, how do you put that in a resume in terms of I've gone to grad school, here's my background, degree, I've been working in this field, but my aspiration is to work in this other field or to work in this other position or these positions. A lot of times, from speaking from personal experience, when I talk to a candidate and they tell me that, I've got contacts, and most recruiters do, with different clients to be able to represent you to them to say, okay, I'm going to show you a resume, but let me give you the background. Let me tell you the real story here, okay? And so that therein can be a tool, for example. Again, your network, people that let's just say there's X number of companies in Asheville that offer the opportunities that you're looking for, and people that work for those companies. There's not anything wrong with kind of prepping it that way. I think to me, every resume ought to have the old term that I use is objective. What's your objective? I've been working here. I want to work there. Um, and I know I'm not stating it very eloquently, but I mean that there's a way to creatively make that transition, for yourself. Hope that makes sense.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That helps.
Any other questions from anyone else?
I have another one about remote work.
Yep.
Prior to COVID, maybe remote work was not looked at as a positive desire, but post-COVID, a lot of people are looking for either remote work full-time or remote work part-time. Should you specify that in your objective?
Well,
or just leave that for discussion?
There actually is a way in LinkedIn. You could put that in your objective if you want to, but there's actually a way if you're looking for work that you can specify. I'm open to all the above. I just want part-time. I just want remote work. Another keyword is hybrid. Basically, that means I go in 3 days a week or X number of days a week, and I'm home X number of days a week. And so what's interesting, though, is I would say since COVID, probably 75 to 80% of my candidates, that's one of the first questions they ask me, is this remote? Is this? Is it that? And so I have to be really clear. Manufacturing is my background. And so it's awful hard, as you can imagine, to do most jobs from home. You got to be there. Now, if you're in IT, if you're in accounting, if you're in supply chain, some of those can actually be done, going 2 or 3 days a week. Purchasing, for example, can be done, that way. And a lot of companies are into hybrid work. I think if and there's some situations where folks only want to do remote work. I think you need to be real clear, and most candidates are. I live where I live, and I don't want to move, but I'm open to do this type of work remotely. And so, yes, you can put in your objective, and there's other areas that you can express that in LinkedIn as well. Yeah, and real key.
Rick, if someone says they're fluent and literate in a language other than English, how do you assess their fluency for an employer, or do you let the employer do that?
I'll let the employer do that. I really, what I want to know is, are you, is it conversational fluent, or did you live in the country? Or are you, I have a real basic, are you basically beginning? Are you expert? Or are you somewhere in the middle? And so, because I'm not a language expert myself, I basically take their word and pass that on. And in many cases, to me, that's a real key skill to include on your resume. Because today, I just, for example, placed an individual with a company in Asheville, North Carolina. This individual's boss is in the Netherlands, and his team is all over Europe, for example. And so, being multilingual can be an advantage in a lot of situations. So I'd encourage you to put that, even if it's only conversational versus professional or excellent at this. I think it's important.
Thanks.
Got a question coming in, it sounds like, or looks like.
Yeah, Rick, we had a question from Charles.
Yeah.
He said, can you tell us where to find info forecasts on growing or needed skill sets?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's probably not a great answer, but it's what I've tried first. It's really go online and start looking online. You can go to some business journals, like the Wall Street Business Journal or some of the other business magazines. But there's probably a lot of articles out there that'll talk to you about, what's current, what's needed now. It's in many cases, it's kind of a toss up as to where the future is headed. But, I think it's, there's a number of articles out there, online, for example. I just Google it and just see what came up, and then you can actually dig in to some more specific areas if you know you're more in supply chain or more into different professional areas.
Yes, you can also explore, for those who are local, you can explore NCWorks sites for labor market information. And while it might not give you, forecast for 5 years from now, you can get a good sense of trends and what's popular, at least at this point. So I think it's exploring and finding sites that you feel are reputable and just questioning, just type in Google. ONet.org is one. CareerOneStop is another Department of Labor site where you can get a sense of where the trends are.
Great. Any other questions?
Rick, are you going to show us someone's profile and point out any no-nos?
Well, I wasn't. I know there's going to be another. Sounds like another speaker coming in a couple of weeks to kind of lead you through developing a LinkedIn profile. I don't know that there are any mistakes that people made. I mean, to me, it's you don't want to put everything in the kitchen sink in your profile, just like you don't want to do it in your resume. Again, you want to highlight, put key things down. I mean, I grew up way back, in the day when, quite honestly, what I was taught from initially was the 1-page memo. So in other words, try to keep everything as succinct and short as you can. To me, two-page resume is fine. Some people that are really technical backgrounds have more than that, and I can understand that. But for all intents and purposes, the shorter the resume, that automatically gives you a plus with a recruiter. Okay, because they've got so many resumes to look through to begin with. The shorter the better. But I think front and back is fine. I don't know that answers your question, but.
And to answer part of that question, Rick, we do have a workshop that we hold at NCWorks. It's a virtual workshop. We have one coming up on September 27th, and Rodney Embler facilitates that workshop. He's the manager here at NCWorks.
Cool.
And he's actually on the call today, so he might say a couple of words if we ask him nicely, but he will go through and show people how to create a LinkedIn profile, right, Rodney? Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Sure, that's correct. Yes, we'll start off with, we'll spend most of the time, the workshop is about 2 hours long, but we'll spend most of the time talking about building your profile. So some of the areas that Rick had mentioned earlier, the summary, the about, the work history, the education, licenses, certifications, we'll talk about all that. We'll also spend some time talking to you about how to build your network and how to use those network connections that you do make to find potential foot in the door for you at certain companies. We'll look at the job section really closely and keywords, and then we'll explore a little bit more about your notifications and your messaging and things. So yeah, it's about 2 hours long, and we're having it on the 27th from 10 to 12, and hopefully everyone can attend. Look forward to it.
And what I'm going to do is I will send out information. I have everybody's email address. So after this is over, I will send everybody an invite. And if you want to join us, great. If you don't, well, so be it. You have the information. But
is that virtual or just in-house?
It's virtual. It's only virtual. Our other workshops are hybrid, but that one is just in virtual format.
Mm-hmm.
Rick, we have a question from Sean. He's saying, what about posting original or reposting content on LinkedIn? Is it beneficial?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure of his question. Sean, can you maybe type out? He's typing some more, so I'll come back to you when he finishes.
Okay.
Does anybody have another question in the meantime, Barb?
Yeah, can you give us an example of a succinct objective that comes across very clear to you so you know how to start the search? I've seen like objectives that are like run-on sentences, and I'm like, what does the person want to do? So can you give an example, please?
Wow, let's see if I can do that. I think I'm looking for a position in accounting that includes these things, so that I can contribute to the welfare of the company. I mean, to me, you want to state what you're looking for, and then you also want to put, what is your objective in terms of bringing those skills that you already have to benefit your employer or your organization. So if, to me, you're right. If you can, it needs to be a sentence or two. And it doesn't need to be run-on sentences. It needs to be very clear and succinct. I'm sorry, I'm sure I didn't give you a good example, but I think, state what you're looking for in as general terms as you can. You don't necessarily have to say this particular position, but if it's finance, supply chain, purchasing, those types of things that you're really looking for.
Okay. You made a good point there. So sometimes I read objectives and it's all about the person and what they want from the company.
Right.
But you said, what can you contribute to the company?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, in this process that we're in, LinkedIn plays a piece of it, but it's really, I think from a client standpoint, we want great folks to come into our company. And from a candidate standpoint, I want to link up with a great company. I can't tell you how many people tell me, I want this to be my last job. I want to work there for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, which is a great objective. And I think it's a good objective, but so, in this process, yes, it's a two-way street. You've got to determine, each candidate has got to do their due diligence. Is this the right fit for me? But obviously on the flip side of it, the company's saying, is this the right person for us? Is there a fit here? And so in as much as you keep that process transparent, because the worst thing that a candidate could do is think they're making a great decision and then 3 months later realize I didn't make a great decision, and then, so how do you, and so you want to do all that you can on the front end to make sure that there's a good match, there's a good fit, here. So, yeah. And I think, companies look at things like that when you're, if it's all about me, then that tells a company something as well.
So Rick, further to that question that we had a moment ago, he went on to say, people use LinkedIn as a Twitter sort of place. So he's saying, for example, he could post about a quality engineering issue he faced and how he did it. His goal would be to share with other engineers and maybe give the, I think that we would let people know of his interest in the field and the skills he brings to the table, how he solves problems. How do you see that? Is that a good thing or not?
Well, I'm just thinking about how to answer that question. I think there is, each of us, everybody that has a LinkedIn account has kind of a, has their profile, and then there's a homepage, or there's other ways to message individuals and to post articles or to post things. I think I would keep that out of my LinkedIn profile, but then use there's a posting opportunities, in LinkedIn where you can post articles, start conversations, those types of things. And I would use that tool really to do, if I understood the question correctly, more sharing information, problem solving, those kind of things.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Mark is asking, what are your thoughts on LinkedIn Learning and the certificates that are posted to your LinkedIn profile at completion? And I think we had that a little earlier as well. It was sort of tied to Sean's question about skills.
this may not be the right answer. I mean, this may, another recruiter may tell you differently. And it's not that I don't value it. I don't put a lot of value in it. And that may, and maybe I should. I note that individual cared enough to go out and do that. I think that to me, that's a plus. But I'm looking in their LinkedIn profile and the resume that I'm going to get from them as verification. Okay. So it's a starting point, I guess it would be my point. It's basically a light that tells me to pay attention to these things.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
How do I approach salary negotiation?
Right.
Well, here's what I tell every candidate on their first and second interview. Do not get into that discussion. Invariably, I've got more examples of this than not. You're going to get it. You may end up with a number that could have been better, particularly if you let your recruiter work with you. Okay. Recruiters got insight into where the employer wants to go, even though they may give you a range. And then as you go through the process, there's conversation that's happening. So, I think if you're not working with a recruiter, which is fine, I think one of the things is, first things first, is this a good fit for me? Do all that you can do to determine, is this a good fit for me? And this is what I want to go for. Don't get illuminated with the lights at first. Okay. Just hold your course, go through the process. And then on maybe the third or fourth interview, then you start talking about things like that. And to me, a real key way to address an employer and not put them off is to say, yes, salary, if they ask you, what do you want? Salary is important to me, but you can say, we're not at that point to really discuss that yet. Or you can say, look, I trust you to make me a fair offer. And I'll certainly consider that. And I would really like to have more conversation with you about that later. But right now, I really want to understand, what do you expect of me? What does the role consist of? What development opportunities do I have? Those kind of things. So it's really, first things first. The reason an employer does it, certainly, is to make sure they're in the field of play. If the range is 80 to 90,000, but I'm saying I got to have 150, then obviously we don't need to waste each other's time. Okay. But, oftentimes that's typically not the issue. And then that's what my job as a recruiter is. When I first talk to a candidate, one of the things we talk about is geography and salary. Okay. And if they're in the range, then we move forward. If they're out of the range, then I just say, I don't think this is a good fit for you because the upper end of that this client's looking for is this. So anyway, oftentimes, more times than not, companies will put their range when they post on LinkedIn or Indeed. They'll put a range out there.
How important, Rick, do you think general or soft skills are in terms of the LinkedIn profile? I encourage people to make sure they include soft or general skills in their, with resumes and cover letters. How important are they in the LinkedIn profile?
I think they're very important. I mean, and it depends on what you call, soft skills, but certainly leadership, team building, being a good team player. I mean, all those are pretty important, as well as the whole communication suite, that we have. So, yeah, I mean, I think they're very important.
Awesome, thank you. I think people often get caught up in the technical skills they have, and sometimes forget to include those in their profile. And I think we have time for maybe one last question, if anybody has a question.
I have a question about follow-up with you as a recruiter. So if we have our first conversation and I'm interested in talking with you more, do I send you an email and say that to you, or do I wait for you to contact me?
I mean, I'd like for you to reach out to me. That would be fine, because I may contact a candidate about job A, and after the initial discussion, realized that candidate's really not interested in job A, and they're really interested in something else. And so then that becomes a whole different conversation of, I do have opportunities like that, and let's talk about that. Or either I don't have one now, but I may have one in the future. Here's how we ought to stay in touch with each other, for example. So that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Wendy, really quickly, do you have one last question?
Yes, just let's say I have an interview and it sounds like a great fit for me. How do I get over that kind of fear and take that leap of faith that, yes, I am going to leave my job and start this new job, and not fear like it's not going to work out and they're going to fire me in a week?
So one of the things that you know, this is a head game. This is all in our head. You know, that most of us battle with that or have to deal with that one way or the other. Think of it this way. My encouragement, Wendy, is to think of it this way: is, you know what? I'm going to go get some information. There's some information out there that I don't have, and I'm going to get it. And then once I get it, I'll be able to make a better informed decision. Am I interested or not? Do I want to pursue it or not? So think of it that you're doing something for you, which is to go get some more information than you've got today. And there's not anything wrong with information. It's good to have. Okay. And so think of it that way. I mean, you know, I guess it can be a little scary if somebody finds out something, but you know, another way to do this is, I have people that interview on the weekends. I have people that interview before work or after work. If you think that's an issue, take a half a day off or a day off, for example. I mean, think of ways that'll make you feel less intimidated or less nervous about it, if you can, you know, to really talk about that. And the employers know. I mean, they understand that they try to be accommodating to candidates that are interviewing. They understand you got a job, you know, and that. And quite honestly, those candidates that treat their employer that they're with well now, the prospective employers thinking they're going to treat me that way too. So, you know, I mean, I think if you were to say, it's difficult for me to take time off during the day, and so can we interview? Can we have a conversation after hours or Saturday morning, something like that? Anyway, but think of it as information. That's what you're doing. Information is power, and you're getting information for yourself, and then, you know, whether you want to proceed or not.
Well, this has been a jam-packed hour. I'm telling you, we're right down to the wire. It's been so informative, Rick. Thank you so much for giving us all of this wonderful information, and thank you for all the great questions. I found it really interesting and helpful. So I'm going to close us out. I'm hoping Mark will come over and help me figure out how to transfer this recording into something we can post at the EWI site. But thank you for your time. Thank you for all of the participants, and
wish you all the best.
take